Hello, my hey, I got something to say, people. Happy Friday. I know, we usually go live on Thursday, but I was doing for the first time my full, brand new keynote speech yesterday. For the first time ever. And it was awesome, and I had a blast. So thank you for all your support. We will talk about that later. Right now, I'm going to be bringing in soon Carol Holmes, who I have met, Carol Hatton-Holmes, who I met at NABO. And after just talking with her for a few minutes, I was just so in love with this woman. Like, you have to come on my live show. And thank you, Carol. She should be in here shortly. She was very sweet about switching the dates for me. So it's all right. It'll be worth the wait. So guess what Carol does? It's something that I've never had a guest come on and do. Can you guess? All the years I've been doing this, and I've never had a guest come on and do this. Send me your ideas. I want to see what you say. There she is. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Sandy. How you doing?
Good. I'm making them guess about what you do. And I said, I've never, ever had a guest on that did what you do. But we're not going to tell them yet. We're going to hold off on that. Happy Friday, Carol. Thank you so much for changing the day for me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Guess what I have here? My Nabo cup.
Yay.
That's how we met. All right, but before we get into what you do, I'm going to just read a little bit about you. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. Because I've never seen someone with this kind of bio, so I love it. Carol has lived in the Philadelphia area her entire life. She has a daughter, a stepdaughter, a stepson, and 3 grandchildren, all girls, including a set of 8-month-old twins and a 2-year-old. In her professional life, she held a corporate position including technology, sales, and service recruiting and training until 2011. And then the layoffs happened. She left corporate and she started a business with her friend called, is it Gener8tional Connections?
Yep.
Hey, helping companies bridge the gap between generations. The company still exists, but her partner does most of the work at this time. Now, this is my favorite part. Nobody guessed what she did. I'm just saying nobody. In 2020, she got Animal Reiki Certification. She got her Animal Reiki Certification as well as veterinary? I always say that wrong. Veterinarian, there you go. Cannabis Certification, and started a business helping pet parents with their challenges, which I know about this, with their pets, such as anxiety, pain, post-surgery, cancer, and end of life. This is what she currently does. Well, it's been all over the place, Carol, and I can't wait to dive into it. But we're going to back up a little bit. Because when I asked you, what do you want to tell women around the world, the first thing that you said was, have a voice. Don't be afraid to speak up. And I just want to tell you, she has exclamation points there. So tell me why you picked that.
Well, I think that, so much particularly having been in the corporate world with a lot of men, because, I was in technology for a long time and it's still pretty male dominated. It was tough as a woman. And if you didn't speak up and have a voice, you weren't going to get anywhere. But on the other hand, when you did that, you had to be vigilant and kind of deliberate in what you said, because you certainly didn't want to be pegged as a troublemaker or and I think sometimes, particularly in that world, you weren't respected unless you spoke up, because people thought, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And then when you spoke up and you did know what you were talking about, you gained a little bit more respect. So I just think it's important that in the world today that we speak out and let people know that, we do have something to contribute.
All right. So
I want to really dive into that because they're speaking out because you want to add to something professionally that's being discussed, and then they're speaking out about something personally happening to you, like harassment. So let's dive into the first one, which is tougher. Harassment towards you or someone else, and the questions are coming in. Have you ever had a personal experience with this yourself?
Well, yeah, I actually have. You know, in one of my corporate jobs, I was, um, I would call it harassment. It was a gentleman. It was above me, and he was extremely disrespectful to women. And, it was bordering on harassment. He would tell people, oh, women, come over and sit on my lap. And you'd be like, what? I'm not gonna do that. But, if you spoke out at that point, in that time period, you were the one that got pegged as the troublemaker, not the other person. But I think in today's world, it's a lot different. And when you speak out today, people listen. They have to listen, particularly with all the EOC regulations and, everything that's going on. I think in today's world, you can speak out a lot more freely than you used to be able to without the repercussions.
I
Because
agree.
if you used to speak out, people, you were afraid that, well, I'm going to lose my job, and then am I going to find another job? Like, what's in my record, and who's going to say something? And I think in today's world, it's a little easier to speak out. Again, you have to be, again, vigilant and deliberate about how you go about it. But I do think it's a lot more accepted to speak out in today's world.
Mm. You know, one of the viewers is wondering, and I wonder if it's still this way today. Do you believe women can be hired on how they look or their age still, but men, they don't have to deal with that? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think that's still absolutely an issue. Oh, it is, for sure. Yeah. And I was in, especially when I was in recruiting, I mean, you would hear comments from other recruiters who'd be like, what? You really said that? So, yeah, I do believe that. I still think that exists.
So what do I do about that? I guess, speaking out, like you said, is one part of it. But do you feel as if, here's another question, that if there's two people going for the job, that the woman who is maybe not what most people would think, oh my God, the right look, do they have to be like brilliant in comparison to the guy going for the job?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I would answer that by saying it depends on, I was actually a recruiter for a recruiting company. So I wasn't the recruiter in the company. Okay. So there's a difference.
Oh.
Okay. And so it all depended on who the recruiter in the company was. And, your selection as a recruiter in the recruiting company, you had to know who you were sending the person to. So it all depended on who the person hiring was and what their priorities were. And my job as a recruiter was to sell the person, obviously, who was more qualified for the job. So I didn't care whether they were a man or a woman, but I did have to understand what the hiring manager's requirements were.
By the way, your eyes were priceless when you said that, because it's true. You were like, oh my goodness, I'm sending this person to this guy, and that's going to be great. But if I send them to this guy, they don't stand a chance. And you knew that.
Right. You had to.
Okay. So I think the next point that you gave, it's a difficult one. And many people, when I sent this out to them, said they wrestle with this. See something, say something. If you suspect something and it's not right, talk to someone about it. I have to tell you, some people said they're not proud of it, but there's times where they kept their mouth shut because they were afraid of getting fired.
Yeah. And again, that's a very fine line. However, you always, you know, you hear things, particularly in the news today, you know, when you have a mass shooting and somebody goes, oh, you know, I thought that guy was a little off, or I thought that girl was, she was a little weird, and I didn't say anything. Oh, maybe if you said something, we wouldn't have had 10 people die. And I get that it's a hard thing, because there is a fine line. Because, you know, somebody could be a little weird, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a mass shooter. But I think in some cases there are clues, and people didn't speak up, and maybe we could have avoided some of the things if people had. But again, I get that it's tough, and it's a subject that, you know, you really have to be careful what you do.
You know, this young man who's watching was saying it depends on the culture of your company, and that he switched companies because he didn't feel comfortable in the company he was in. And now he's in a new company, and this is a gay gentleman, and he says he feels so accepted, so he would not tolerate or stay in a company that he felt like he couldn't be himself. Good for you, dude. Good for you.
Right. I was going to say good for him, because there's a lot of people that would have just put up with that and not stood their ground. And, you know, I believe that, you know, you should, if you feel comfortable doing that. And if you're not comfortable doing that, I guess then you're not going to speak up. But you know, I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough subject, and I wish, but I guess my long-term thing is, if we don't speak up and we don't say something, we're never going to change anything.
Yeah.
Everything's going to remain the same, because nobody is going to speak up, and we're going to be in the same place 5 years from now that we are right now.
You're right, Carol. You're right. You know, there's a lot of things, and trust me, my friend, I love them. I love them. A lot of times they'll say, will call me and go, you have to say something. I'm like, why me? Well, they say, well, you'll say it and not offend them as much. And I get it. But there are times where it didn't turn out in my favor because I did say something. But I still am okay with that. I'm still okay with that. I'm more than okay with that. You know, I think I would have felt worse if I didn't say anything.
Right.
I'm not saying I won friends, but I'm glad that I said something. Even in family situations, like you were saying about the shootings, there are people that's like, well, that's my cousin, that's my nephew. They don't want to say anything. And yeah, I know people that did speak up, and thank God, you know, because it did save some lives.
Right.
But it's scary. You don't want to, you know, nobody likes being shunned. Nobody, Carol.
No, and it's uncomfortable in a lot of situations, but I think you got to think of, like, what's the right thing to do?
Yes. Yeah, I like that. What's the right thing to do? All right. This one is near and dear to my heart. This one I can so relate to. I cannot tell you how many people have said this to me. Never think that your questions, comments, or ideas are stupid, and don't let anyone let you think that. At my talk yesterday, there's a piece of it that I tell that so many people said, Sandy, stop asking so many questions. You look uneducated. But I'm telling you, every time I raise my hand, I think half the people didn't know what they were talking about either. But I cannot tell you how many times people tell me I ask too many questions. I'll say I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't know this, and I look uneducated.
Well, and I'm a question asker too. So, you know, I do ask a lot of questions. And, you know, I hate, especially when women say, oh, this is a stupid question, but don't say that, because if you don't know what the answer is, then I'm sure there's someone else that doesn't know what the answer is too. And it's not a stupid question if you don't know what the answer is. So, you know, get rid of that. Let's get rid of that line. This is a stupid question, because you wouldn't be asking it if you thought it was stupid, right? So, you know, we need to get rid of that. But the other thing too is, I think, you know, you have to be confident enough in yourself to be able to do that.
That's
and
true.
ask those questions. But you know, I've been in circumstances where I just didn't understand, and I needed to ask the question, and I didn't feel stupid because I was asking the question because I didn't know what the answer was. And if you want
And that goes along.
if you want to call me stupid for that, well, go ahead. But I don't consider myself stupid for that.
No. And I'm so glad you said that, because I thought that I would clarify it a different way, but it still was clarifying my question. I'd say, well, this may be a silly question. It was just as bad as saying, it was just a nicer way of saying, you know, this is a stupid question. But it's so, don't do that. Don't clarify. The same thing with ideas.
Right.
You know,
Same thing. Right.
yeah. It's
And I think
an idea. You're brainstorming.
Right. And I think sometimes you have a great idea. And, you know, and particularly because of what I did with Generational Connections, and I was very sympathetic to millennials because, you know, millennials were years ago getting a really bad rap. You know, everybody was saying, oh, that millennial, then they don't want to do this, and they don't, their work ethic is this. And, you know, my job was to go in and help people understand why maybe millennials are the way they are, and to have a better understanding. But I do think too that younger people don't get it. They have ideas and they don't get as respected because they're younger people, and they go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we've always done it this way. And, you know, so, you know, I think as younger people to be able to speak out, even if somebody doesn't necessarily embrace your idea, you were confident enough to speak it.
Carol, I don't know what made this story pop in my head, because but it happened 4 years ago. And we were helping build a wellness spa. And the guy that was head of it said he wanted our ideas of what we thought of the plant, right? And we're sitting there, and I'm there with me and all men, right? Contractors, business owners, whatever, and they're laying out the plans, and what do we think, and about the budget. Now, this gentleman who we loved, the most amazing man, would switch his mind all the time. He constantly was changing his mind and driving everyone crazy. And they would call me, like, you got to say something. So he finally said, well, what do you guys think? You know, I'm thinking of changing this. And no one spoke up. No one. And I said, yeah. And I said, you know, I don't think you really want our feedback. I'm just saying, I don't think you, no. I trust you. Said, I really don't think you want our feedback, because I just think this is you're wasting a lot of money. It's too many changes. So he goes, what do you think? I go, I really think you have to trust the people you hired. And the more you keep changing, you're going to lose people. And you just got to stop. And he looked at me in a group of 6 men and said, well, that's a stupid idea. I went, okay then. And so everybody in the meeting, I'm like, you asked me. And so you kept begging. And so the guys were, I'm like, speak up for me, speak up. I'm texting them because he can't see, like, the way it was designed. Say that you agree. Nobody said a word. Nobody backed me up. And they were the ones
that wanted you to
begging me.
Say something.
All right. So the meeting ends, and I get in my car and I call him. I go, are you kidding me? You wanted me, and then he asked me. It was perfect. They're like, no, we're not brave enough. We don't want to lose our jobs. I go, you don't have to say anything, but just agree with me. Well, wouldn't you know it? And this is the good part of it. The next day, that guy called me and apologized.
Wow.
He said, no one ever speaks up to me. No one ever is honest with me, and it threw me off. Like, he admitted his ego got in the way. Now, it could have went either way, but I'll never forget that. And you know what? I'll do it again.
Well, and you should.
You know, and at risk that I'm going to be called stupid. Like, I will do it again, because you asked me. And then I remember going to an entrepreneurship conference, and they said most people who are asking for your opinion, that are higher ups they really don't want.
And most
Do you think?
well, probably they ask, and not very many people like you would speak up and give it because they'd be afraid to say something.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree, Carol. I mean, yeah, you gotta think about it, and you do not want to lose your job, but there's ways to say things, and if it just won't sit right, and nothing will change. And you're right, we'll be here 5 years from now.
And
But I have
I
to.
know for me, if I'm going to say something that I think might be controversial, I think about, I write it down. I mull it in my head and think of the best way to do it. I'm not reactionary because I think being reactionary doesn't get you many places. You really have to, as again, my 2 words are be vigilant and deliberate in what you say.
Good point. Like, think about it, write it down. Don't just blurt it out and be all emotional, because you really think about, I always say, what's the outcome I want? And me just saying whatever in my head, most times it's not going to get me the outcome I want. Yeah. Carol, we got to get this in, man, because I could talk to you forever about speaking up, but I need to really dive into, because you're the only person ever, and let's just state this, besides doing this live podcast for 3 years, I've been podcasting for 15 years, and I've never, ever had someone do animal Reiki. And I love that, and I love first. So here's the biggest question. How did you get into it? Because I think it's awesome.
Well, first I got my human Reiki certification, but I love animals, and I love animals. If you ever, I don't know if you're on my Facebook page, but I don't post anything about my personal life on my Facebook page. I'm always posting rescue dogs, and this one.
Yes, I saw.
Right. So I love animals, and through my human Reiki training, I learned about Animal Reiki. So I started delving into the Animal Reiki piece of it, because I do believe that there is so much to it. And, unfortunately, animals can't talk to us. So it's so difficult for us to even know what's going on. So through energy, it's a lot easier to tell what's going on, and particularly through Reiki. So, I decided that I wanted to do more. And honestly, Sandy, I love animals more than I like people. So I would really rather spend an hour with doing Reiki on a dog than I would on a human. So
Unconditional love. Unconditional love.
Yeah, so that's how I got into it. And once I started doing it, and I saw what I was able to do with helping these animals, it just made me want to continue doing it, because it's just amazing, the attraction. Like, I walk into a room and I'm kind of like, I don't communicate with animals, because there's a difference. I have friends that are animal communicators. And
really?
Oh yeah. Yep. And I'm not really an animal communicator. I'm more of an energy healer, and there's a huge difference. But when I walk into a room with animals, they're very attracted to me, and I guess it's because they feel my energy towards them.
So who is your biggest client? Are there animals that have anxiety of pain, or is it when they're near their end of life? Like, what do you see the most, or is it all over?
It's kind of all over, but recently I've actually done more end of life. And it's a beautiful thing to be in the presence of an animal and their caregiver when they're passing. And the comments that I get from people are, this was the most peaceful, I've had to put dogs down, or, I've been in the presence, and the energy work that you do makes this so much more peaceful for all of us. So I think that's the most rewarding for me. I mean, I do work on animals that have pain and, and post-surgery, not many cancer patients. The cancer part comes in more with the Veterinary Cannabis Certification, because there's a lot of things being done with cannabis and cancer animals. So, You know, that's
Yeah.
that piece more comes in that light of it. But I think the end of life piece is where I get the most satisfaction.
Okay, so I have so much to dive into, and I'm looking, and we only have a few minutes. When you say you get the most out of it because you can feel the energy of the animal when they pass, like it's a beautiful thing versus a stressful
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so much the pet owners can sense that, and they're less stressful because, you know, as a pet owner, trying to put an animal down is
Oh God.
it's horrible. And it's just not a nice process. So through Reiki and through the positive energy, I think they can feel that in the animal, and they know that that was a peaceful passing.
Mm. So are you doing this in their home? Is that what they do?
I can do it in their home, but you also, Reiki is also can be done remotely. I worked with a woman just recently that she's in Virginia, and her dog was passing, and I worked with her, you know, during that time. So Reiki energy can be transmitted remotely, and most Reiki practitioners do a lot of remote work.
See, I didn't know that. I've had Reiki done and I loved it. But the only thing I've ever experienced is like their hands were around my body, not on it, but around my body. So I didn't know that could transfer virtually. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I'm actually seeing a question that I would like to answer for somebody on the screen that says, why does my vet pay? Well, and this is really important for people to understand. Not many vets will even talk to you about cannabis because it's illegal. Because cannabis is ruled by the veterinarians are ruled by the FDA. Okay.
Mm.
So it is not legal for vets in many states to even talk about cannabis. So they don't, because they're not allowed to. So when a vet says, oh, that's not a good idea, they're not going to tell you it is, but you can go and you can look up studies of cannabis with cats, with dogs, with anything, and see that there are positive results. And I deal with several vets that are cannabis certified veterinarians. That is what they do. So, you know, if people are looking for cannabis certified veterinarians, I certainly can you know, direct them there. And the vets, most of them are in California, because California, you are allowed to talk about cannabis as a veterinarian. In Pennsylvania, where you and I are, not allowed. So they don't talk about it. And they're much more readily prescribing prescription drugs to you, because that's what they know and that's what they're allowed to do.
Yeah. I have friends that have used it with their cats, and it was marvelous. And they got them off a lot of heavy drugs,
and
you know, as well.
Yeah, and particularly, you know, animals, cats and dogs that have cancer. It's remarkable what cannabis can do.
That's what it worked for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, and people don't understand that.
Yeah. So I love the fact that you said you and animals are tight, people iffy. So in your business right now, with the cannabis, with the Reiki, what do you want to do with it in like the next year? Where would you like to go with it? You want to?
Well, I think that, you know, I've always been a good educator, a good teacher, and I would love to get the message out to people that there are alternatives to traditional veterinary medicine. I'm not saying that traditional veterinary medicine doesn't have its place. It absolutely does. And I go to the vet, and I take my dog when I need to the vet. But there are certain circumstances where I think that that you could mix the two together, traditional and non-traditional method.
Agree.
But people don't understand, particularly when it comes to the cannabis issue. Like, people are not educated to know that, because how are they going to find that out? If their vet isn't going to give them the education, where do they go to find that? So, you know, I think what I'm trying to do is just make people aware that there are other alternatives to traditional veterinary medicine that can be incorporated at the same time. and just educating people on what's available.
Yeah. I think that would be awesome, because I do agree. I have a friend, she did a lot of research because she has a lot of animals to find a vet that would, agree to try the cannabis with their cats.
Mm-hmm.
But it took her forever to find someone. And then she did. And oh my God, it made such a huge difference, Carol. Such a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell her about the Reiki. All right, we got to go, Carol.
Oh
This
my
has
gosh,
been awesome.
I went so fast.
I told you. Well, it was two topics that I really wanted to dive into, speaking up and alternatives for animals. So how can they find you, though? If they want to reach out, where would they go?
Well, the best place to reach me is my email, because I read my email all the time. So can I give you my email address?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's CHATTONHOLMES. So it's my name, Hatton-Holmes @gmail.com. And if anybody wants to email me and wants me to, I'm a great resource for people. If you're looking for something specific and I can't do it, I have a great list of resources for people if they need help.
Cool. And then as far as social media, where would they go if they wanted to, is it Facebook? Is that where you are mostly?
Yeah, I'm not a real big social media person, because most of what I do is word of mouth and people just find me. So yeah, my Facebook is Carol Hatton-Holmes. So you can certainly
All right,
go
cool.
to my Facebook, and that's fine. Mm-hmm.
Just in case they wanted to reach out and message you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Right. Well, hey, I got something to say, people. You know how much I love first, and this was a first. If you missed it, don't worry about it. I'm going to record this, and when Carol and I are done, I will post it on all the social media sites. Carol and I would really appreciate liking and rating it. It does make a huge, huge difference. I appreciate the support. And until next time, you know what I'm going to say. Toodles. Bye, Carol.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks a lot.